Good evening, all.
Good evening.
Part of the Book Readers Club series. ఈ రోజు మీతో ప్రముఖ పెయింటరు అండ్ ఆల్సో బుక్ రైటర్ తరాబ్ ఖాన్ ఉన్నారు మీతో. ఇది సీజన్ 5 ఎడిషన్ 13 ఈరోజు ప్రోగ్రాము. తరాబ్ ఖాను particularly she specializes in somewhere in between surrealistic and abstract paintings. So we will ask her later what that means. So I am also layman like you all. She's an also author and she wrote a book called Dancing with Cloud. It's a very unique book in the sense that tana paintings to with background explain చేస్తూ meant for is a different kind of book where the interpretation paintings గురించి కానీ తర్వాత vivid color combination గురించి కానీ and she sings with the poetry she wrote or the explanation. Very very interesting personality తరాబ్ ఖాన్ మనకి ఇక్కడ. ఎందుకంటే మనకు మామూలుగా పుస్తక రచయితలు ఉంటారు, ఆర్టిస్టులు ఉంటారు, ఇద్దరు వేరు వేరుగా ఉంటారు, కానీ ఇక్కడ యూనిక్ కాంబినేషన్ మనకు. తను after writing the first book, The Dancing with the Cloud, now she is working on another book also. అది కూడా త్వరలో విడుదల కాబోతుంది. I think పెంగ్విన్ వాళ్ళు దాన్ని పబ్లిష్ చేస్తున్నారు. And you can see the painting behind her. మధ్యలో కొంత ఎవరైనా తెలుగులో మాట్లాడలేదు, తను ఇంగ్లీష్లో చెప్తుంది కాబట్టి ఏదైనా కొద్దిగా ఇబ్బంది ఉన్నా ఏది ఉన్నా సరే మీరు ఇది నా వాళ్ళ మీద ఉంటుంది. బుక్ రీడర్స్ క్లబ్లో కూడా లైవ్ వస్తుంది, అట్లాగే ఫౌంటైన్ హెడ్ గ్రూప్లో కూడా లైవ్ వస్తుంది. మీ క్వశ్చన్స్ అందులో ఏమన్నా డౌట్స్ క్లారిఫికేషన్ ఉంటే మీరు చెప్పండి. సో ఐ కెన్ ఎట్ ది ఎండ్ ఆఫ్ ద ప్రోగ్రామ్ నేను ఆ తరాబ్ ఖాన్ను అడుగుతాను. సో షీ గోయింగ్ టు స్పీక్ ఆన్ ద ఇలస్ట్రేటెడ్ వరల్డ్ ఆఫ్ టోకెన్. సో మీకు అందరికీ తెలుసు, హోబిట్ కానీ లార్డ్ ఆఫ్ ద రింగ్స్ పుస్తక రచయిత వరల్డ్ ఫేమస్ జేఆర్ఆర్ టోకెన్ ఉన్నారు కదా. సో ఆయన బ్యాక్గ్రౌండ్ గురించి, ఆయన ఇన్స్పిరేషన్ గురించి, ఆయన మోటివేషన్ గురించి వేరే రచయిత డేవిడ్ బేర్ రాసిన పుస్తకం ఇది. సో వాట్ మోటివేటెడ్ టు క్రియేట్ ద మ్యాజికల్ వరల్డ్ ఆఫ్ టోకెన్, ఆయన ఎందుకు దాని ఇన్స్పిరేషన్ ఎక్కడి నుంచి వచ్చింది. మనకు కనుక ఇప్పుడు లార్డ్ ఆఫ్ రింగ్స్ సినిమా చూస్తే అసలు బియాండ్ అవర్ ఇమాజినేషన్ కూడా మనకు హద్దు ఉంటుంది, కానీ హద్దులు దాటి ఆయన ఇమాజినేషన్ అందులో పాత్రలు కానీ లేకపోతే ఆయన క్రియేట్ చేసిన ఆ వాతావరణం కానీ, ఆంబియన్స్ కానీ, ఆ టైం పీరియడ్ కానీ ప్రతిది కూడా మనకు అద్భుతంగా ఉంటుంది, రెప్ప వాల్చకుండా మనం చూస్తాం. సో అలాంటి రచయిత గురించి, ఆయన ప్రపంచం గురించి మనకి ఈరోజు తరాబ్ ఖాన్ మనకు ఎక్స్ప్లెయిన్ చేస్తారు. వెల్కమ్ తరాబ్ టు అవర్ షో. On behalf of all members of Book Readers Club and lot of other your fans also, and we are going to stream live in 2-3 Book Readers Club. Those are enthusiast readers. You can start with a small intro about the token and go on with how why you are interested in token, what was the reason behind the world, and you can explain a little bit about this magical world to us, and we are all ears. Over to you.
Okay, so first of all, very good evening to all of you. So it's so wonderful because all of us have joined together because of a mutual interest in books. So that is one thing that really binds us together. So wonderful to connect with people who are interested in books. So today I'm going to speak about this beautiful, stunning book. It's almost like a collectible. I strongly recommend it. And it is called The Illustrated World of Tolkien by David Day. So here is the book. You can see here. It's a classic black cover. So Tolkien's world have inspired artists for many generations and has given rise to myriad interpretation of the rich and magical world that he created. So in this book, we have collected illustrations of more than 24 artists. So I have a small presentation that I would like to share with all of you. So here it goes. Share screen. So everybody is able to see the screen? Am I audible? Am I audible?
Yes,
Tarav,
you
can continue. I think
Continue.
you don't wait for responses. Continue, please.
Okay, but it's visible. Can
Yes. Your name is visible.
Okay. So J.R.R. Tolkien. Can you see the slides?
Yes.
Okay. So here I'm speaking about J.R.R. Tolkien, who is known as the author of the century. He was a great illustrator as well. So here is some more information about him. He has authored many best-selling books that have sold millions of copies. The Hobbit is very popular. Then The Lord of the Rings. Then we also have Mr. Bliss, and then there were some books that were published posthumously. So The Unfinished Tales by J.R.R. Tolkien. So these are some of his famous books, and many of his books have also been have been converted into movies, and they are mega hits in movie format as well. So here is something about his childhood as to understand what is that method in madness. So what really inspired his imagination? So that is a very, when he was
Tarab, slides are not visible.
not visible.
Yes.
I'll just go back. Go back. Even now, it's not visible?
No, only your name is visible.
Okay, my name is visible. I'll just get back. Share. I'll start sharing again. Cancel. Yeah, I'll start sharing again. Here. Here. Now you can see?
Yes.
Okay. So this. Oh, here. Yeah. So this slide is visible, sir?
Yes. Perfect.
Okay, so I'm going to take you back to his childhood times. When Tolkien, his actual name is not Tolkien, but Tolkien, L is silent. So when he was a little child, he always loved to draw and illustrate all his imagination. And when he was a little child, he had a very unique love for many languages. He had mastered many languages like the Greek, the Old Norse, the Finnish language, the Gothic language, Spanish, and many more. In fact, when he was a little kid, he used to create his own language. He used to combine two or more languages and create something new. So that was the kind of magic that he chased even as a little child. So there are two major influences from his childhood that evolved him as a great master. So there's one very interesting incident that when he was living in South Africa and he was bitten by a spider, a tarantula. So what happened is once this spider bit him and the poison was all spreading over, somebody sucked it out. But that day something happened inside him. He overcame the fear of spider, and that incident kind of affected him and his imagination. He lost the fear of the creatures, and that also ignited his imagination. Another important incident from his life is that he lived in South Africa, but when he grew up, like 5 or 6, when he was 5 or 6, his mother moved to Britain back, and because for his education. And when he was living in Britain, he lived in a place of contrast. So it was a town where one side of the town was an industrial town, where he could see the chaos and the rustic life of industries. And on the other hand, he also saw a very whimsical countryside. So what happens is when you live in a world of contrast, our mind tries to encapsulate this life. It becomes more curious. There are many questions when you see a life of contrast. So one side you have questions about the living conditions and the hustle and bustle of life, On the other hand, you have questions about the nature. When you live in countryside, the place is serene. When you live near ocean or the great gardens or even the forest, there is a lot of wilderness that is there to explore. So these are the two influences that created a lot of impact on the young Tolkien, and that helped him in uh, elaborating his imagination. So, this is the cover of the book. On the right, you can see The Illustrated World of Tolkien by David Day. And on the left hand, you see the inner page, the first page. So, what I found very interesting about this book is that even though there are so many illustrations, and there is so much of mythology and cosmology in all these 9 books, spread in these 9 books. This book has been very neatly packed with different topics. So, first, it is the topic of in the beginning. How did this each book begin? So, what was that seed that, seeds of imagination that led to this beautiful forest of imagination? So, after that, it talks about the people, the races, and the kingdoms. So, what was the setting of each book? It has been explained through the illustrations. And then, since Tolkien's books are much about the mythology, there is a great mention of beasts and dragons in all his book. So there is a separate section for the beast and the legends, and then there is a section for land, seas, and skies. The beautiful, stunning backdrops, the setting of his stories. And then it moves on to another segment that is about the sanctuaries, the castles, and the fortresses. So, and then it also talks about the battles, the wars, and the warriors. How did they dress up? What did they do? What was the personality? So, what is something very beautiful about illustration is that it can set even a color, something as simple as a color can evoke a certain mood. It can influence the narration. It can create a kind of visual impact. So, for instance, if you take the example of blue color, so blue color is linked to dreams and also to some melancholy and sadness. So, illustration play a major part in giving us insights and understanding the crux of the story. So, am I audible to everyone? Mr. Padla?
Yeah,
I'm
yes,
audible?
madam.
Yes.
Yeah,
Okay.
if any problem is there, I will
Okay,
tell
sure.
you. Till I don't tell you, it's all right. Assume that.
Okay.
And
So,
also you can post it on your wall now.
Okay. So I'll do that. I'll just okay. So we here. These are some of the beautiful illustrations. As you can see, in this illustration you can see the movement of the winds and the people, how they are dressed up, and there is also a talk about the wilderness. Share to my page story. Just hold on. I'll continue here. Share now. Okay, so I'm gone live here. So this is one of the beautiful illustration. And now this is again more beautiful illustration, stunning visual illustrations of his work. So here we come to the end of this. And now let me get back, stop sharing and start video. Hello. So here's after showing the illustration, I would like to talk a little about his backdrop. The Tolkien was a fellow of Oxford, so he was a linguist and had since he knew many languages. So what happens is once you know many languages, especially the languages in which you have mythologies. He had a special interest in mythologies and cosmology, so that it's a very important, a very viable component for his backdrop and setting of almost all his work. Since he was a linguist and he had access, he understood so many languages, it was so easy for him to glide through various mythology and return back with some jewels. So, even as a child, he was an avid reader. Even at the age of 4, he was, he was so much interested in languages and reading. So, and he also had a knack for inventing the language. So, what happens when you are young and when your mind opens up to so many possibilities and you are learning more and exploring more and thinking more, your imaginations become more beautiful, more charming. So, as human beings, we are very curious beings, and curiosity comes in many shapes and sizes, and there are different kinds of curiosity. One is the intellectual curiosity, trying to understand how things are happening. And the other kind of curiosity is epistemic curiosity. So humans have this innate curiosity to try to understand what is happening behind, or what is the mechanism, what is there, the layers behind what is visible to us. So he was very rich in imagination, but also he was a very curious child. He had a great epistemic curiosity. So it helped him that way. So one of the many there are many interesting stories about Tolkien. It is said that he had a major dislike for the motored vehicle and he did not buy a car until later in his life. So, what happens when he took to his car and he started driving? He was a very rash driver. So, he just knocked off a compound and met an accident. So, in spite of, instead of losing the enthusiasm of not driving or getting scared, he converted that adventure into a story. So he got more interested in that mechanism and he used his curiosity to create a work of art. So that is one of the incident. And Tolkien was also very good friends with C.S. Lewis, with Lewis Carroll. And together they had 3 or 4 of them, they had this group called Inklings. And they used to discuss each other's drafts and the stories, and not only discuss or try to understand, but they used to also derive others' curiosity and use it as a component in their stories. So there was a lot of intellectual exchange between the friends and the groups. So that is one part. So the reason why I picked this book, so I can say that this book, it's almost like a library, because Tolkien had a very illustrious career. His career spanned for more than 40 years with 9 best-selling books or even more work that he has created. So this whole book is like an anthology. It is like a kaleidoscopic representation of all his imagination. So Tolkien himself was a very amazing illustrator. So if you Google his illustration, you'll find beautiful, stunning illustration. Even as a child, he loved to illustrate. So this is one reason. And what happens is when you have 24 different illustrators and each trying to add a bit of imagination, it's like Tolkien's imagination, and they try to enhance it and bring their own magic touch to that. The story appears to be more magical. So that is one interesting thing about the book. So you have 24 artists with their own whimsical imagination that adds to the magic of Tolkien. So that is one reason why I picked up this book. And it is a beautiful depiction of mythology and cosmology. Another interesting fact is that Tolkien felt the need, he saw there was something missing about in the British culture. So, like we Indians have an Indian mythology, the Greeks have their mythologies, the Chinese, Romans, most of the countries had civilizations of those times had their own mythology and their own legends. But that was something that was missing in Britain. So Tolkien took upon this responsibility, and he was the one who said, if there is no mythology, let me create it. So it was a lifelong obsession for him to create legends, to create a new mythology for Britain. And he so very well succeeded in his dream or ambition. So so this book also reveals a lot about, it illustrates the Tolkien's epic world in a beautiful way, and it is and mm, so so I can say that Tolkien's books are like multiple universe. So it is not just about since the man was so curious and he was so much into mythology and making little universe. He was so passionate about the process of creation that not only he built or constructed characters or give them a magical backdrop, but he also gave them their own languages. So many of his best-selling books have their own languages. Elvish is the very famous one. So he created his own language, and the characters in the book, they speak to each other in that language. So if you ever had a chance of watching Lord of the Rings or Hobbit or any of his fantastical movie, you might have seen that there is a component of another language here. He created different languages, and each story of him, be it The Hobbit or The Lord of the Rings or Mr. Bliss, so each of his story is like a universe on its own. So it's like a wholesome thing. They have the culture, the backdrop, the language, the stories, their legends, their mythology, their cosmology, and so much more. It is a known fact that Tolkien was so obsessed with the perfection. He was a perfectionist, and he was so obsessed with the whole process of creation that even if he went a little wrong in one part, he used to, scrap the whole part and redo it. And he never bothered about how much time that costed him or how much time was consumed. He wanted things to be perfect. He wanted the things to be the way that he had imagined in his mind. So that is a very interesting thing about Tolkien. And since he was a professor, and he had a he was not the silent kind of person. He was a person who enjoyed life. He was someone who loved to play pranks on others. He was a very lively person, and also had a kind of naughty streak in his personality, and that comes across or reflects in his work. So I would say that it is a kind of playful imagination that he was blessed with, and that has got lot to do with the way he was brought up. So another fact that I would like to talk about is, since he spent his early childhood days in Africa, and suddenly there was a shift, and his mother moved with his brother to Britain, and his father was left behind and he passed away. So what happens is, many times when a child encounters a certain sense of loss, uh, I see imagination as a kind of coping mechanism, because the human desire to live is so strong. Even if we face any kind of adversity or any kind of loss, we try to compensate or cope, and have this kind of imagination, a kind of magical escape where we're not there to face the life, and yet we learn to survive and dwell in that safe space. So that is another important thing that I wanted to discuss. And so I would also like to read a few lines from pages, some of the pages. And there's also another important thing about him, that he believed that the names generate a story. So he was very particular about the names, how he named the place, how he named that universe, and how he named his character. So, for example, the example of Baggins, it's just a harmless character. And then he had this character of Bilbo, an individual who is sharp, intelligent, and even a little dangerous. So he used to derive these names from certain mythology and spunk, add a little spunk with his own imagination. So that is how, it's and one very important, many of us have heard about the Middle Earth. So it is said that the Middle Earth is not a kind of parallel universe or it's something outside our own planet, but rather it is said that the Middle Earth is very much a part of our own world, but in an undated history. Like nobody knows when it happened, but it did happen. So that is how he explained his Middle Earth, the concept of Middle Earth, that it is within the earth, the places are happening in the earth, it's not a different world, but things happen differently because it is set in a different period in history. So here I'm going to read a few of the chapters. So here I have this. I would like to show you this beautiful character of the elves. So since he was fascinated with mythology and the fairy tale delights, he always used concepts like, characters like elves, trolls, the Scandinavian lepcherons, and all kind of entities in his magical kingdom. So speaking of elves, he said, we know that Tolkien also looked to Norse mythology for the history of his elves. So much of his was own creation, but some of it was also derived from other mythology, and he used to spunk it and spin it in his own way. So he also looked to Norse mythology for the history of his elves. In Norse mythology, there are references to both the light elves of Elfin and the rather sinister dark elves of the subterranean Starvelfian. So Tolkien took this somewhat mysterious division and he created the first great event in the history of his elves, known as the Sundering of the Elves. So this is, gives us a glimpse of how he derived from other elves and trolls, and he spin it in his own tales. And then we are talking about the segments of the character. As you can see, here's one character, and here you can see a beautiful illustration here. So about his character, he speaks that Tolkien spent his life encouraging us to do good things both simply and heroically. So a lot of characters in his creations are also an extension of his own personality. He believed in being straightforward. Believed in being fearless, and that is also what he derived and used it in his creations. And it is also a fact that Tolkien had been a participant in the World War One, and he suffered a lot of loss. Like he lost many of his good friends, and that had a major impact on his life. And after that incident, when he wrote his book, a lot of changes where you could notice the shades became a little darker, and it is about the transient nature of a human life, dealing with the subjects of death and sadness. So that is what he derived from his own life. In fact, all the authors, we all hide a bit of our own being, our own character, our own whimsical thinking in our work. So here we are again going to talk about the beasts and the dragons. As you can see here, so this is also a as I gave all the details in the presentation. This is also this here in this chapter we are talking about the beasts and dragons. So here is a special reference to the dragons, and as we know, the dragons are the winged creature and somewhat lizard-like, and they often breathe fire. These beasts are found in myths and legends around the world. And as we are as ignorant of the meaning of dragon as we are of the meaning of universe, but there is something in the dragon's image that appeals to the human imagination, as we find the dragon in some distant places and time. So if you're an ardent you find games of thrones and that kind of mythology interesting, so you can see these are the presence of dragons can impact the story in a great way. And these are some of the legends. They teleport us to a different time, a time that we have not witnessed or had a taste of, but it makes us think about the many possibilities. If these legends have really existed some time back in our life, or it's just a creation of the mythology. So that is what we are speaking here about today. And am I audible to everyone?
You are, Tarab. Go on. Tarab, your mic is muted. Tarab.
Tara, please unmute your mic. And also I think there's some technical glitch.
So am I visible again?
Yes.
Yes. So did we hello?
You are audible and visible, Tarab. Go on.
Okay, sure. So is it how long was I lost?
It's okay. If
It's
anything,
okay.
any glitch is there, I will inform you.
Okay,
Just,
sir.
just go on.
Okay, so the glitch happened just now, or was I lost for a longer time?
No, few seconds. You can go on.
Few seconds. Okay, sure. So I'll do a quick rerun of the presentation because some of the people who have missed it, we can just have it in a quick way. Is that okay? Okay. So here we have spoken about the legend of J.R.R. Tolkien, who is known as the author of the century, with his copies selling for millions of copies of most of his work. So he's also the creator of The Hobbit, The Lord of the Rings, the Mr. Bliss, and there were some work that were published posthumously after his death. So they were also considered as one of the best sellers. So as a child, he drew inspiration from much from his own childhood that created a great uh, impact on his life and in his imagination. So he loved creating his own language. He was a very bright student, and he was very interested in linguistic. He was a linguist, and he not only was interested in the new foreign languages, but also had a special inclination for the Greek, the Old Norse, the Finnish, the Gothic, and Spanish. So these spaces are the treasure trove of a lot of interesting imagination. So he used that the traits of his childhood, the enriched imagination of his childhood, in his creation. So again, I've spoken about the two major influences in his life, how he was once bitten by the tarantula in Africa when he was a little child, and he seemed to have lost the fear of the spiders. And in fact, he became a bit obsessed with those creatures and saw them as very whimsical and tried to use the spiders in his major, not only spiders, but many such creatures into his own work, in his books, in his construction of imagination. So he grew up in the land of contrast. On one side it was an industrial town, and the other side it was a lovely countryside. So that helped him to expand his imagination He had a lot of epistemic curiosity and was always interested in understanding what is the process behind the creation. He had a lot of questions even as a child, and not only he had questions, but he also liked to chase and find more answers. So that is how his imagination expanded. This is the cover page of the book, and the first page of the book on the left side. And as we have discussed about the contents of the book, the reason why I chose this book, because there are more than 24 illustrators who have contributed to this mega edition. And it has been so beautifully segregated and compartmentalized in different topics, where it does not have only the illustration, but it also has written text about the illustration. So this book tells us about the method in madness. So what was his method and how did he derive his imagination? What was the reason for that construct, and how did his whimsical imagination blossomed? So this is again some of the beautiful, stunning illustration. You can see the movement of the winds, the men, how they are dressed up. They are from a slice of history, kind of whimsical period. And then we also have this illustration of Godalf and a dragon. So here we come to end of this. I'll stop this presentation. So anybody having any questions or they want to know a little more about this?
No, you can go on, Tara, but at the end of the program, we will ask questions.
Okay.
Yeah.
So I'll
you
just
can go and complete the session, and once you complete, then we'll come with our queries.
Okay. So I'll just start the video. Yeah, here I am. So I want to tell a little more about this book. The Illustrated World of Tolkien. Like he's pronounced as Tolkien, the L is silent. It's put together at the artworks and essays from the illustrators, painters, etchers, and fascinating and scholarly way. It has been written in a fascinating and a scholarly way by the renowned expert on Tolkien. So David Day is an expert on his legendary works, and it has been written and penned by him. And it is an exquisite reference guide. So I would suggest that even if you have not read any of his book, this book, even if you have not read The Hobbit or The Lord of the Rings of any of his mega books, because most of his books are like huge, and there are people who buy the book, but they're unable to finish. So this is one book that I started, but I couldn't finish. So if you want to get some more insights, or if you want to have a kind of magical entry into the Tolkien world, so this is the place to begin with. So, and if you are already a fan and you have read much of his works earlier, this can help you to see things through a kaleidoscopic imagination. So this is the book, and this is one of the best books that I have seen on Tolkien. And in fact, if you are a writer or if you are an illustrator, I think this can be your companion, and this can help you to understand the process and help you to develop your own imagination. And it teaches us to experiment, to explore, and go beyond. So here we come to the end of the session. And if anybody has a question or would like to ask me something.
That was one cute session, Tara. So you provided through light on the insights of the Tolkien and his world. And there are some queries I received.
Okay.
One is from Akka.
Okay.
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 So, how Tolkien mythology or fantasy, whatever you call it,
Okay.
can be related to human reality? How
Human
how
reality.
is fantasy world
Mhm.
human reality, our real world? How
Okay.
does it fit in to understand
Okay.
human reality? Yeah.
So, being a human, we are a conscious being. We are so different from animals in the way we can think, we can ask questions, and we can dwell in imagination. If you see the examples of the scientific fiction writers, even when Jules Verne created his book, so he mentioned about the trip to moon. So when there is an imaginative mind, they explore possibilities. They see things that most of the rational beings, there are many people who are limited by their imagination, and there are people uh, who grow by imagination. So if you have, it is very important for a human to have curiosity, all kind of curiosity, asking a lot of questions, scraping beyond the surface, and then uh, is having your own imagination and seeing the possibilities. For examples, as I said about, see the example of Arthur C. Clarke. He was a scientific fiction writer, but or the Star Trek, the mega space opera. So they have featured things like iPad, what we use today, and they had a hint of that many decades ago. So they saw future. So this is the beauty of imagination, and it is a very important quality to be imaginative, and we should encourage our children to be more imaginative. So it gives a window to the world of possibilities. The more you can imagine, the more dreams you can chase, and the more you can create. So it is an infinite thing.
Another question was,
I,
as against like you say Greek or Roman mythology, Tolkien
Mhm.
altogether create his own fantasy world. So what
Correct.
exactly he wanted achieve through is
Mhm.
magic realism or whatever call easy characters, whether they depict
Correct.
the human emotions like greed or heroism or whatever. What is the basic, the fundamental difference between
Mhm.
mythological character and
Mhm.
is fantasy characters? Let's say Hobbit. Let's say
So,
is Lord of the Rings.
correct. 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 So what happens is when we read a mythology, be it our Indian mythology or the Greek or Chinese or all kind of mythology, so that is already there and existing in one format. So what Tolkien did was to create. He added a kind of spunk. He added more character. He added more human-like thing, touch. The concepts of creativity. A touch of humanness in all his characters and his universe. So, like I said, I spoke about the British mythology. There is no mythology existing in British culture. So, he was the one who created it. So it's not only about Tolkien, but also about Harry Potter, or all those many kind of great books that we have read. They have created their own mythology, and that can be used as a reference for in future. So that's the magic they spin, and I think it is a very essential quality to be imaginative and create such fantastical world, the world of possibilities. So the
To
mythology
extend
is
the
fixed. Yes,
yeah,
yes.
yeah. Go on, go on, go
So
on.
the mythology is fixed. We have certain chapters in our mythologies, but here we are adding more dimensions. We can identify what was missing, or how it can be reinterpreted in some way, how it can be reimagined. So the human progress, if you see, the imagination doesn't have to be stuck or come to standstill with what we have, but it is more about what are the other possibilities and what more we can do or we can create. So I see it that way.
Yes, Tara, thank you. And
Like
we know that
I have a
uh,
Okay.
I continue this, Rishel, to the last question. Extend one question.
Okay.
Tolkien created the Lord of the Rings, and also
Hmm.
we knew about the Harry Potter and its stupendous
Correct.
success.
Correct.
Okay, that means that not only unlike Western mythology, the Western
Hmm.
fantasy
Hmm.
had took the world by storm.
Hmm. Hmm.
When compared to the Indian context, Okay, our Ramayana or Mahabharata caught the imagination of the world. But unlike that, how come our own fantasy, maybe in our mother tongue Telugu, there are myriad stories where they created a fantasy world, but not a single
Correct.
character, not a single story
Mhm.
went beyond India
Mhm.
and could catch the imagination
Mhm.
of the world. So why we are stuck still
No,
with mythology,
no,
and
no.
there is
I
lack
think
of.
Mr. Pada. Mhm.
Mm,
Mhm.
mm.
I would differ here
Yeah,
because if
please.
you read some of the Arthur C. Clarke's book, he has references to
Mm.
Ravana and Ram, and then he also there are so many. They pick up these details in a myriad form. Maybe it's not a full elaborate sequence they have, but there are many who are inspired by the Indian mythology. And recently we have seen, Amish Tripathi and other very famous authors who have picked upon mythology and used it as a base, as a setting for their stories. So I think we need more authors and more people like Tolkien to take it forward. So we need
My
such people.
my question is, Tarab,
Hmm?
our mythology do have the reach and depth to
Correct, they do.
penetrate the world.
Correct,
But
correct.
how come a Harry Potter kind of world, how come a
Hmm.
Tolkien kind of world is not
Hmm.
created by Indians, or if had we created, how come they
Hmm. I'm losing you. The sound is not audible. Hello? Mr. Padla, can you repeat it? The sound is not audible.
yeah,
Hello?
yeah,
So I missed that part.
can
The signals are choppy.
yeah.
Okay, now.
Unlike
Hmm.
uh, Indian mythology has got. Can you hear me now?
Yes, yes, now I can hear
Can
you.
you hear me?
Yes, 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 yes. So, see, Mr. Padla, I
Unlike
also have one point
unlike
to make
Indian
here.
mythology,
Yes, I have one point to make. So I was a part of the panel discussion in Orissa Literary Fest, where we had a topic about, something similar to this, about the languages. So what happens is, most of it is about the access to the materials. So the mythology is very rich, but many times it is about the translations. People don't have access. Like someone like me, I would need a good translated work to understand the great legends in Telugu or in Kannada. So, the access to material is one form. And I think some responsibility also lies with the parents. And how do we hone, how do we nurture our kids, and how do we imbibe that? So that responsibility, it's all about the exposure. So if our child spends all the time watching Peppa Pig, we can't expect him to be an expert on mythology. It's how we choose to nurture our kids, and how, because Tolkien was curious, he was able to create a mythology and cosmology, and create something, contribute for the British culture. But we need men like that, who have that kind of interest and inclination in
And women
creating
too.
such.
Srishal,
Yes.
please go on.
Sir?
No, no,
Yeah,
I'm asking Srishal.
yeah. So basically, it's an observation, not a
Okay.
question, but an observation.
Okay.
Um, People like writers like Tolkien, why
Mhm.
would they
Mhm.
sort of prefer their own magical realism
Mhm.
versus
Mhm.
dealing with existing mythologies? Is, I
Mhm.
think, because of
Mhm.
the concern that they would probably subject it to political correctness when
Okay.
they deal
Mhm.
with mythology, particularly in the
Mhm.
context of India, where
Mhm.
mythology has sort of become part of religion.
Correct.
And it's very difficult for Indian authors to be
Mhm.
very pragmatic and objective while dealing with mythologies. We have
Mhm.
writers like S.L. Bhairappa who are attempting, and there are
Okay.
certain writers from the southern states
Mhm.
where they have a lot of Dravidian movement
Mhm.
influence. There are a lot
Correct.
of literature that has come who have objectively dealt with the Indian mythologies, Ramayana, Bharata, and Bhagavata. But I think the concern for most others would be to speak with the Indian mythologies, would be subjected to branding, basically. I think that is one worry, I guess. Whereas
Okay.
you mentioned about Scandinavian countries and in the West, basically, where due to the cultural renaissance and all, maybe
Correct.
they are much ahead of times, much ahead of us. And
Correct.
like as BP was saying, there is enough besides Ramayana and Bhagavata and Mahabharata. There are enough characters like the Lord of. There could be hundreds of the likes of Lord of the Rings could come in Indian languages and in Telugu also. I would like to quote, for example, a popular movie, Bahubali. I'm sure you heard of it.
Correct. Yes, everybody knows
Yeah.
about
So it was such a huge success. That kind of material, the folklore still has a lot of demand, but I think it needs a proper presentation, and the more men should come forward, and also women should come forward to deal with such subjects. And that's an observation.
So, sir, I would like to add here because I see there is a lot of thing that is amiss. So, in the way, like even if you want to, there is a lack of patronship. There is a lack of support. Even if you create a great work of, mythology, you have finding the good publisher. That itself is a big task. So, unless and until we don't have that kind of infrastructure, the patrons, and the encouragement, it has to be there. So it's very essential, and sadly it's very lacking. Even if somebody wants to create, he has to go through, they want ideas that are very sellable, that can be sold. So it's a bitter truth, and I think somewhere the responsibility lies with a lot of places, be it the publishing industry or be it the cinema, or see, even if we have such wonderful shows happening in theater, if you become a part of like I visit a lot of theater shows. So if there are about a show featuring a celebrity, there is a huge rush and the tickets are sold out. But if you saw something about mythology, and there the people are much lesser there. So it is, we don't inculcate, we want our children to be, more influenced towards West. We want them to grow up and have a certain kind of thinking. So being connected to your roots and being, having that kind of nurturing, and then having that kind of support. So both of them is like,
would you think the OTTs give that opportunity?
Absolutely. So I'll give you a very subtle example. Like I mostly watch English or Hindi movies, but since I in this lockdown period, I have got inclination towards the Malayali movies. They are so beautiful. They are a gem, and that we have sadly missed. We have never had that kind of exposure. But since now they are available, and you have a place to watch, availability is very important thing. Since they are there, we can watch and appreciate it. And if there wasn't any Amazon or Netflix, we could have missed those masterpieces. And ultimately it's all about business dimension also. So the people try to make things that where they can have they can mint money. So very popular concepts. They, first things they ask is ki kitna bikega, or how much money will it make, or what is your audience, what is your reach. So we have the responsibility lies with many of us.
Just one final point I would like to make, and then I pass it on to BP Padala. About the market, you were saying about market, but I would like to mention about Ramananda Sagar's Ramayana and B.R. Chopra's Mahabharata.
Correct.
They were a huge success.
Correct.
They kept people busy, and in the first phase of the Corona hit in the last year, the Doordarshan has re-telecasted that, and
Correct.
people have watched it with similar enthusiasm.
Correct.
And
Absolutely.
because they are made so wonderfully, and I'd also
Mhm.
like to say, you will find a series on Kurukshetra on Netflix. It's available now, and it's
Okay.
drawing a lot of attention. I think
Mhm.
there is always this market, but how
Mhm.
you package and how you sell it is
The
also
makers,
important.
and see, even in a movie like Bahubali, they
Yeah,
had to be made larger than life
yeah,
kind of. The people want thrill, people want masala,
yeah,
so that is how they package it.
yeah,
So
yeah.
that is the bitter truth, and I think yeah, responsibility lies with everyone, and we need to nurture. Nurturing is the key.
Right. Thanks for that, Tarab.
Thank you so much.
Lipi,
Thank
over
you.
to you.
Yeah, Tarab, one
Yes.
final question. So let us keep the mythology a little bit aside because there is a
Okay.
subtle line between mythology and fantasy. Here we're
Okay.
talking about fantasy world like Tolkien's and Harry Potter. So do you see
Correct.
any possibility of Indian Harry Potter happens in near future?
See,
Will
uh, so it's not only about the authors. It also has to do with publishing industry. Also, are they willing to see even for the art, like author like Amish Tripathi? He had to put in his own money and create his work. Because he had that kind of conviction in his work, he went ahead. So a lot of people, even if uh, mm, so that is how it is. Can I just repeat the question once again? I lost it.
do you see any possibility of
Possibility is
Indian
immense.
Harry Potter?
Yes, possibility is immense. It
Do you see any
depends
possibility?
upon patronship. It depends upon the, you know, creation. So there are two parts to the creation. If Tolkien had created a wonderful epic, and if it was not famous, we would have never been sitting here and talking about him. So creation is one part. Then making it, catching the interest of the people and promoting and marketing and packaging. There's so much to do. So possibility is always there. It depends upon the patronship.
But I didn't come across any
Mhm.
worthy book after
Mhm.
Rushdie's Harun and Sea of
Mhm.
Stories.
Okay.
So after that, I didn't in any Indian language,
Mhm.
particularly the genre of fantasy.
Mhm.
So my question is, are you going to be next Rowling Tarab
Then
from India?
okay. See, there is also one thing that I want to talk about is there is a very uh, it's such genre stuck in between, because when you go for children book, usually people expect it to be simple, like simple concepts like a Peppa Pig, which children can understand, or if they talks about the skin of a child or about death, very simple words. And then you have books like Harry Potter, and the grown up adults, young adults, they reach. But there are many books that can swing in between. They are as much for the children and as much as for the adults. So it's a very confusing genre in between, and many publishers may be reluctant in investing such ideas. So this is also one important part.
Great,
Mr.
great,
Prasad.
great, Sarab.
Yeah.
It is a delightful session having you here as a part of our Readers Book Club. And I'm
Thank you
sure
for that.
the discerning readers would have enjoyed your talk on the token. And if your talk could generate interest in going through,
Mhm.
pick up a book and read, or at least they
Mhm.
can go back and watch
Great.
his movies,
Mhm.
at least with a
Correct.
renewed curiosity about, because now they have
Imagination.
background of uh,
Mhm.
the author. Thank you very
Yeah.
much, Tara, for coming over here and giving
Yes.
good
So, Mr.
presentation.
Pati, I would like to conclude in a way that we humans are conscious beings. We can dwell in our past, and we can have thoughts about our past and try to derive things. But we can also have projection for our futures. We can, it is an infinite world of possibility that we live in. I think that is what makes us more magical, the existence of humans. And we are so different from animals in that way. So having honing curiosity, cultivating, inspiring children or encouraging them. Children are very imaginative. It is we grown-ups who try to we try to curb their imagination. Okay, this is not good. You have to take a fixed route and stay in that path. So this is a beautiful element we have as humans. So we should hone our curiosity and be more imaginative and try to create such wonderful work.
We can say science fiction also a logical extension of fantasy world. So
Yes.
where we project into the future, and lot of Asimov rules also regarding the
Correct.
robot were
Robots.
adopted by scientists, and now they are the backbone of the artificial intelligence. So we
Correct.
never can write off fantasy
Correct.
as some
Correct.
kind of a big fiction.
Correct. And what is a very interesting thing that I found is, a lot of people think that science fiction is all about the Zigmos and all kind of, the aliens popping out and those gadgets. But anything that defies the set of natural laws can be termed as a scientific fiction. For example, the Arabian Nights. So Arabian Nights, you have flying carpets and you have all kind of whimsical things happening. So that is also a kind uh, of scientific fiction. And there's another Bangladeshi writer that I read, and it was about the concept of Mardana and Zanana. So what happens in the world? Suddenly the world swells, and there is an exchange. So the women have come out of the parda, and they're exploring and moving around like men, and men have been they're contained in their cocoon and asked to stay indoors. So even that qualifies to be a scientific fiction. I read this book, the Anthology of Scientific Fiction. So very interesting things. The more we learn, the more we dig into, and more we find, and more we make connections. So we humans have this concepts of schemas. So once you have, when you learn a certain concept, it becomes a scheme of thing. It becomes a scheme. It's called schema. So what happened? There is a conceptual integration. The more things you learn about, so you can infuse those concepts and connect it with your present knowledge and the present imagination and create something more wonderful. So the more exposure you have, the more books you read, the more movies you watch, or the more questions you have in your mind, the more insights you have. Even something as being a queen of trivia, being interested in trivia or being curious, that can also enable you to have that kind of imagination. So I think that's about it.
Great, Tara. Very lucid explanation about the author and his magical world. Okay,
Thank you.
magical world. Thanks a lot, Tara.
Thank you